Hello everybody, so here is Black Angel again, and I'm here to talk to you about extroverted sensing. So why am I making this video where I talk about extroverted sensing? I thought that I probably should make a couple of videos about functions and explain a couple of things that are normally not explained when we think about types. And that's because we assume that types in MBTI only use 4 functions, but that's not actually true. 4 functions are those that the person values, that the person lives by. But what actually happens is that every person uses every function, and functions can be seen in every person you meet by looking at how functions work in each type and position. So I'm going to start with this video about extroverted sensing, where I'm going to tell you what extroverted sensing actually is and how extroverted sensing works. So extroverted sensing, whenever we're talking about extroverted sensing, we're talking about someone that is very focused on making money, on political influence, on being powerful and having a lot of influence on people. So we're talking about that is power-oriented. Someone that wants to have an influence on others, that wants to actually be strong and look strong. So someone with that uses extroverted sensing is someone that is going to do everything in their power to actually look strong. And that's because extroverted sensing is a sense of strength and a capacity and ability to actually evaluate one's own strength and the strength that other people have, and one's own strength as compared to the other person's strength. So an extroverted sensing type is going to be able to evaluate if their strength is equal or superior or inferior to the strength of another person, as well as they're going to be able and capable to use the other person's strength against them, a little bit like in the martial arts. And they're going to be able to calculate how much strength the other person has left and be able to actually wait until that person depletes that strength so that they can use their own strength at that point. So this you can see, for example, in boxing. So this is what extroverted sensing is. And someone using extroverted sensing is going to be a very active person. So according to where the function is, you're going to have a very active type. Why am I telling you all these things? Because I recently stumbled into an ENTP and she fucking looked like an ESTP because of how she was using her extroverted sensing, but she's actually not. And that I was tricked by that made me think that maybe others could fall in the same trap. So extroverted sensing dominant type is never, ever going to be someone with a sedentary life. An extroverted sensing dominant is going to be an extremely active individual. That it is sports, that it is actually going anywhere or being active all day through. Extroverted sensing dominant types are active individuals. If you ever met an ESTP that sits in front of a computer day in and day out, that's not an ESTP. That's some other type, and there's something wrong in your typing, but that's not possibly an ESTP. An ESTP has difficulties sitting on a chair. An ESTP has difficulties seeing themselves closed in an environment. So an extroverted sensing type that is an extroverted sensing dominant is never going to be able to be closed in an environment for a very long time. That applies obviously also to ESFPs. ESFPs are extremely active individuals. Even if they're maybe fluffy and a little bit bulky, it doesn't matter. They're always going to be active. I met an ESFP girl once. She's super active and even sporty. But if you look at her, you would never say so because she's so bulky. And she's fluffy and very soft to look at. But she's actually very strong temperament, and she is a manipulator because that's how ESFPs use their strength. They manipulate people's emotions to reach their own goals and to actually gain power over the person. So that's extroverted sensing in the leading position. Extroverted sensing creative are people that are going to be able to use strength the same way an extroverted sensing dominant does, but they're going to do that only when it's necessary. So extroverted sensing creatives are actually creative with extroverted sensing, and they're going to sometimes even become weak or make themselves weak so that they can work with their extroverted sensing and be powerful again. So an extroverted sensing for auxiliary like an ISTP can for example all of a sudden become broke and fall out of the radar and not have any power whatsoever, just for the sake of rebuilding that power, rebuilding that influence, and regaining money from scratch. That's something that ISTPs and ISFPs can do. ISFPs can suddenly decide that they want to change their way to make money, for example, and they can decide that the way they use is not what they wanted. So like an ISTP, they can go broke and fall out of the radar, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're back and they're stronger than ever. And that's what ISTPs and ISFPs actually do with their extroverted sensing. They toy and play in a very serious and very marked and very materialistic way with their extroverted sensing. Extroverted sensing types, especially ego extroverted sensing, so we're talking about ESTPs, ESFPs, ISFPs, and ISTPs. These types are extremely pragmatic types. So they tend to be very here and now, very focused on the present, and they enjoy having power in the here and now. They're not very interested in having power in the future. Well, a little bit more with ISTPs and ISFPs. They tend to look to the future a little bit more because their introverted intuition is slightly stronger, and they can actually attempt to project their power in the future. But that's not going to be their main focus. The main focus of an extroverted sensing ego type is going to be that of obtaining power here and now, and be strong, look strong in the here and now, in the present. So that's what I can say about the first two positions. So if someone is sitting still in their chair for 4 to 20 hours without ever doing anything or looking at the ceiling or whatever, that cannot possibly be an extroverted sensing type, that it's dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, or inferior. It especially cannot be a tertiary extroverted sensing type, because a tertiary extroverted sensing type doesn't understand the importance of sitting still and resting. So an extroverted sensing mobilized type, an extroverted sensing tertiary, is going to be always in motion, never stopping, always working on their power, always building up their career, always working on whatever it is that they're interested in, and they're very, even excessively active types. Whereas extroverted sensing inferiors seek people that are active because they tend to fall into these periods of inertia, and they need help to actually be prompted to move. So the kind of help that introverted intuition auxiliaries and introverted intuition dominants give to extroverted sensing dominants and extroverted sensing auxiliary is that of finding internal calm, internal peace. It's not about stopping, literally, like an introverted sensing type would do, like going to a spa or resting in a pool or whatever the case may be. It's about finding internal peace. So whenever you find someone that is sitting still on their chair, that's going to be an introverted sensing type. Because even an INFJ or an INTJ are going to be in some way active. They cannot actually sit there and do absolutely nothing. At some point, their subconscious is going to prompt them to actually use their extroverted sensing and do something. I've seen INFJs sit there and do nothing for maybe 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden they started fidgeting or doing something around themselves because they couldn't actually sit there and do nothing. And the same applies to INTJs. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about introvert sensing types. So introvert sensing types are divided into 3 categories instead of 4, because you're going to see similarities with introvert sensing dominance and introvert sensing mobilize as when it comes to their use of extroverted sensing, because introvert sensing dominance, ISTJs and ISFJs, do not use their extroverted sensing because they basically ignore it. Their focus is mainly on their physical sensations, on their body sensations. They tend to do a lot of yoga, for example, or they can be pranotherapists or people that anyway have a strong focus and strong attention to the body and the body's reactions, their own and other people's. So they are very prone to relaxation, and they tend to ignore activity and activation. Especially they do not pay attention to power, they do not pay attention to anything of that sort. The same applies to INTPs and INFPs in a way. And that's because on the contrary of the introvert sensing dominant types, they instead do not understand the importance of strength and power. They consider it violence. They cannot see the positive sides of actually being active. But to an extreme, the main difference is that if an ISFJ is going to prepare a dinner and then switch on candles and relax and massaging her partner and so on, an INFP, for example, instead is going to suddenly out of the blue attempt to see if their strength exists. They do not know why, they do not understand why, they have no clue why they do that, but they want to know if they can do that. And that randomly happens when we're having to do with our vulnerable function, and that's also connected actually to their extroverted sensing tertiary, which is self-esteem based on their status of health. So at some point they randomly recognize that maybe having some form of strength, of physical strength, can support their self-esteem because it proves them that they're healthy, not for other reasons, only for the reason that it proves them that they're healthy, nothing more. Whereas ENTPs and ENFPs are quite weird with their use of extroverted sensing. They attempt to look extroverted sensing types for some wicked reason, and they can actually look quite imposing and strong in some way, but then after half an hour they suddenly look like puppies and they start wiggling their tail and running around and doing weird and stupid stuff. That's extroverted intuition leading. In socionics, we say that ENTPs and ENFPs have extroverted sensing role function, and the role function normally kicks in when we are in back against the wall situations. But that's not exactly how it works. What I have seen in reality is that functions do display. Maybe through other functions, like we've seen in INTPs and INFPs, for example. But in some way it does show up. And when it comes to ENFPs and ENTPs, it's normally a defense system. So when they feel attacked, when they feel treated the wrong way, when they feel disrespected in the case of the ENTP, or when they feel outraged, like it could be for an ENFP, they tend to use extroverted sensing. So they all of a sudden become imposing, and they all of a sudden try to gain power and position, but then they let it go abruptly without even giving it importance anymore. And that's normal with ENTPs and ENFPs. That's how they use extroverted sensing. Then there's another group of people, which is ESTJs and ESFJs. ESTJs and ESFJs criticize extrovert sensing. So if you ever meet an ESTJ or an ESFJ, you're going to hear them complain a lot about those people that actually use extrovert sensing. So they're going to say that all of the sports is useless, that all of that action is useless, that it doesn't make sense to be that way, that it doesn't make sense to do that acquiring power is stupid, and all that kind of stuff. That's how ESTJs and ESFJs use extrovert sensing. They're going to be people that are also going to be able to joke a lot on power. They're going to make a lot of jokes revolving around the concept of power and strength. People that create that kind of joke, like those people that go running with 40 Celsius degrees outside, do they see the Virgin Mary at the end of their run? That kind of joke there, I don't know if you find it funny or not. That kind of joke is typical extrovert sensing demonstrative. So we're talking about introvert sensing creative auxiliary. And that's what they do. They create all of these jokes about people that practice sports, powerful individuals. Jokes about Donald Trump are probably created by ESTJs and ESFJs. ESFJs are particularly funny individuals. They actually have a ton of irony, and they are very fun-oriented individuals. They're very positive and very fun-oriented individuals, so they're probably more likely to actually joke about extrovert sensing than an ESTJ that is instead going to complain about or criticize extrovert sensing attitudes from their extroverted thinking, perspective, which is based on public opinion. So ESTJs, remember, ESTJs and ENTJs always embody public opinion. So I think this is a quite clear view of how you can find extrovert sensing and what extrovert sensing actually means and how it works in every type. I hope it helped, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.